Welcome into the Brant Parcel Show. So what a day in college football. Kansas getting a huge win over Oklahoma, their first win against the top 10 team since 1984. And, I feel good. It's got to feel good for Kansas, a team that's experienced a lot of losing. Sadly, just to really sum up Kansas football since 1984 is a lot of losing. I know they had some success in the late 2000s under the Mangini, the big guy. But Kansas, a really good win today. And, Kansas quietly 6-2. Tough loss for Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma really, at this point in the season, I think once you get to 8-0, I think once you're at 8-0, you're really feeling good. That's when a lot of time, I think 8-0 is kind of that magic number where you're really feeling good and when you know that you're really legit, have a legit chance of doing something special. But Oklahoma failing to get to 8-0 today, still 7-1, still a really strong team. This is a tough loss, and they had an opportunity to go down and win this game, but Kansas, credit their defense, holding there at the end to get the win. So Oklahoma falls to 7-1. Kansas moves to 6-2. Huge win for the Jayhawks at home. Saw the fans storming the field. Big win for Kansas. Tough loss for Oklahoma, even though Oklahoma had played fairly well and they had some opportunities. Dylan Gabriel, pretty solid. They just could not get a touchdown at the end to get the win. So Georgia big over Florida today, 43-20. And I think that with this one, this was just a big victory for Georgia. I think this really just proves that I really don't think Georgia had to prove anything without Brock Bowers. I think even if they lost this game somehow, I don't really think people would say it was strictly because of Brock. I think people understand what Georgia is capable even without Brock Bowers, but this is a really big win for Georgia, a win that they really needed to really put their foot down and show people that they are the number one team in the country and that they are capable of performing at a very high level and continuing to be dominant. So, Georgia gets a really big win over the Gators today. Credit Georgia. They performed well. Carson Beck played well. Ladd McConkey had a nice game. I thought Georgia ran the ball very effectively. I thought their offensive line looked dominant. It looked similar to the way their offensive line played last year when they were performing at a championship level. So, Georgia gets it done. Big win over a strong Florida team who had been playing hot and had a quarterback who'd been playing with a lot of confidence in Graham Mertz. So Georgia gets the W, and Georgia continues to look once again like that strong team. That's what really begs the question, who in the country can really beat Georgia when they play their best? It's really tough. I think Bama maybe can. I think Bama could maybe give them a game. I think LSU could maybe give them a game, but it's just really it's really tough to top Georgia once they are playing that high a level football. Oregon big over Utah. Oregon, with Bo Nix, I'd say Bo Nix, Dan Lanning, those two guys have really got this Oregon team believing. Those two, together, just outstanding. Bo Nix perform at a high level. Utah just doesn't lose often at home. Oregon just goes in there and dominates Utah. I think, if you're an Oregon player, you got to really believe at what Dan Lanning, you really got to be bought into what this guy is preaching at this point because, you coming from Georgia, you think this guy's going to be his way or the highway, perhaps, and he comes in there and he's going to recruit. We're going to recruit at a high level. We're going to recruit at a national level. We're going to get big-time players. We're going to be dominant at the line of scrimmage. You saw in the Colorado game and in this game and at times how dominant Oregon can be at the line of scrimmage. And Cristobal had established that a little bit, but you see with Oregon, this is a team where I think it is safe to say they are fully bought into Dan Lanning. I think Oregon does have an identity that not only we're going to be the flash team that's going to put up points, move the ball, but we're going to have drives that we're going to grind you out. We're going to play effective at both sides of the line of scrimmage. We're going to try to dominate you. We're going to play a similar style to the SEC. So credit what Dan Lanning has done at Oregon. I think this Oregon team is truly bought in, and I think this is a case of the loss to Washington was more so indicative of how good Washington is as opposed to Oregon, maybe not being an elite team. I think Oregon's still, to say they're an elite team, I think that is a question at this point, but Oregon is a very good team nonetheless, and we'll find out. There's still time for Oregon to really show people if they are an elite team. Yeah, Texas, and then Texas big over BYU. Texas, this was a game where, even if you didn't know that BYU had a solid 5-2 record, I think you would assume Texas would win this game. Texas did win big. They had a big punt return, which was awesome. So Texas gets it done, and credit Texas, even though this is a game where you see on the schedule BYU, just because you're Texas, you assume this is a W. Obviously, entitlement does not get you a guaranteed win, but I think this was, to me, Texas getting this win, I think is, I think they need to celebrate it a little bit more, and I think they need to be a little bit more proud than people would expect. I don't think it's just we expect to win this game, so let's get the win and move on. I think Texas should appreciate that they got a nice, strong win today, because BYU is it's a pretty proud program. BYU has not really been anything spectacular in the last decade, but BYU, can they be really competitive? And can they if this was a game where, let's be honest, if Texas was not, if this is Texas last year, I think this game would be a little bit more of, okay, Texas should win, but, maybe they won't, maybe they will. But yeah, Texas, I guess the point I'm trying to make is I think Texas, I think it's safe to say Texas, kind of like Oklahoma, is a very good team, kind of like Oregon. They are a very good team, and getting a nice, strong win here today is something they should be proud of, and they should, really appreciate and not really just take for granted. So, yeah, Texas gets it done big over BYU, and so see what else do we want to discuss here. Ole Miss quietly with one loss too. Ole Miss, under Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss has been really competitive under Kiffin. It's a really strong program. I love the way they can put up points. And so, yeah, that's credit what Ole Miss has done this year. The loss to Alabama was a little deflating, because that was obviously there'd be a lot of hype right now if they won that game, because they'd be undefeated. But that was a game where it's kind of like, if they win that game, then there would be legitimate buzz surrounding Ole Miss, but they don't get it done there. But yeah, Ole Miss still a good team, and under Lane Kiffin, they've been able to put up points, be exciting, and really be a challenge week in and week out for opponents. LSU on a bye this week. Michigan also on a bye. I think Michigan and LSU on a bye. Two of the teams I really follow closely. I think it's a little disappointing when those two teams don't play, because I really look forward to watching LSU and Michigan play. Colorado going at it right now. Travis Hunter, 2 interceptions in the game. Hunter just a playmaker, true difference maker on both sides of the ball. I really love watching this guy compete and get after it. Ohio State and Wisconsin going on right now. Ohio State 10-0 last time I checked. Marvin Harrison performing strong. Back-to-back weeks he's had a touchdown. Harrison hasn't really been quite as dominant as I thought he was going to be this year. He's been really good, but he's not really taken over necessarily like I thought he would. And some corners have really challenged him. But I think what you got to understand is when you're a guy like Marvin Harrison, you're going to get your best shot. If you go against a good level, at least a corner that's at least solid to good, as far as traits wise, is going to give him some problems because you're going to get that corner's A game. So you should expect a few pass breakups. I think why Keon Coleman's starting to get more buzz now is the potentially, Coleman's kind of the wide receiver too, but potentially why he could challenge Harrison is because, the recency bias. Coleman, he's going to likely have the bigger year than Harrison unless Harrison really, starts to go on a tear here these last few weeks. But, Coleman looks like he's going to have the bigger year. Coleman looks like, they both look like they could be on a championship team, but Coleman, if he's on an undefeated Florida State 12-0 team, then that's going to be that'll give him an extra boost. Maybe not as much to surpass Harrison, but it's certainly a boost to really make a case for him to be the number one receiver. But yeah, Florida State really good all-around team. They get a big win today over Wake Forest. Florida State, Mike Norvell done an excellent job with this team. Mike Norvell is certainly a great coach, and he's really showed a lot of great play calling ability. So yeah, Florida State moves to 8-0. The ACC, I talk about the ACC kind of is a mess. To be honest, I don't really know. It's hard to know what to make of the ACC. Clemson's falling apart. Notre Dame's really not that good. Or Notre Dame's not in the ACC, but Pitt, yeah. Louisville one loss, but it's Louisville. Do they really have enough, dudes, game changers to be a legitimate threat? I think, yeah, the ACC, Miami. I think Miami have 2 losses now. So, yeah, the ACC. I mean, this is, to be honest, outside of Florida State, this is kind of a down year for the ACC. To be honest. But yeah, Louisville won big today over Duke. Shows, you're really seeing. I think if the way Louisville's performed this year and the way Purdue has performed, I think you're really seeing how good a coach Jeff Brom really is. Jeff Brom, he is a really good coach. He's done a really good job of building a successful season year one for Louisville, and he did an excellent job at Purdue in his tenure there. And you've seen Purdue really falling apart this year. What is it, 2-5, 2-6? Just a really lackluster year for the Purdue Boilermakers. But yeah, Nebraska. I think Nebraska has done an excellent job. Matt Rule is a really outstanding coach. He's done a really good job of getting Nebraska going in the right direction. Nebraska, their players just play with a lot more passion. I noticed under Matt Rule. Not that they didn't play with any passion at all under Scott Frost, but you feel like Nebraska is just, the players are playing more loose. They're playing with a lot of confidence. They're really getting after it. So, yeah, I think I'm really impressed by the way Nebraska has performed this season. But yeah, I think Matt Rule, I think what you're realizing is, I think his time in the NFL was a little bit of a fluke. I don't think his lackluster time in the NFL is more of indicative of just he's one of those guys that's just a really good college coach and not a good NFL head coach. I think Matt Rule is more suited for the college game. But yeah, he's done a terrific job of really turning this Nebraska program around. But yeah, in UCLA, Colorado going on right now. You talked about Travis Hunter getting 2 interceptions. Colorado really performing at a high level. Shadur Sanders, really good quarterback. They've done a really good job of. I think Colorado. There was a question mark of how much talent were they going to have overall. I mean, referring to depth, I know you're going to have some top end level playmakers in Travis Hunter, but I think it's really cool to see guys on the it's really cool to see some of their other receivers stepping up. Jimmy Horn, Xavier Weaver, some of those guys making plays for them. And if Colorado gets to 5-3, they'll feel a lot better than as opposed to 4-4. And obviously, that sounds obvious because 5-3 obviously a better record as opposed to 4-4. But you get to, like, if you're Colorado, you fall to 4-4, then you're like, man, it's another loss. Now we're at 500 after all the momentum we had built early on in the season. Now we're like really heading into our next game, questioning it. Now you go to 5-3, we're kind of like, okay, maybe we're back to looking more like the team early on in the season as opposed to, the team that struggled as of recently. So yeah, Colorado, I think moving to 5-3 is big. So hopefully they get the win tonight over UCLA. They're down 7-6 right now, but they're hanging in there, performing well.